Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. With us once again, a guest we have on as a guy that's an expert on real estate but knows a lot about the economy. As a matter of fact, he wrote this book recently called The Global Economic Reset. He also sits atop of a company that does more than $100 million of distressed real estate, buys and sells distressed real estate here in America. He also has the very popular website, FabianForLiberty.com. I've given it away. Fabian Calvo, thank you so much for joining us today from California.
Hey, Greg, thanks for having me on. I always enjoy it, and I always enjoy being on USA Watchdog.
Well, good to have you on. First, I want to start with real estate, but I know you know a lot about the economy. You sit across the table from people who buy a couple of hundred houses at a pop. They have billions of dollars to invest. You are connected to big money. You understand it, and you're gracious enough to come here and tell us what's going on behind the scenes and behind the headlines and the things they won't report on the USA Today, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, CNBC. None of that stuff will be reported. You're always breaking way ahead of it, and I guess it doesn't really at this point in the arc matter which party controls the House or the Senate or the White House or anything. It doesn't really make any difference at this point. Is that your contention?
Well, there's no question about it. It doesn't matter who's running supposedly the government. Both of those parties are financed by people like the National Association of Realtors, who've dumped in over $14 million into this election cycle. The financial industry is one of the biggest contributors to outside spending groups, as well as the Republicans and Democrats. And let's face it, we have an economy that's run on cheap credit. The only way that it can continue to grow it is by blowing up markets and creating boom and bust, like they've done with shadow banking. Greg, who shadow banking in America now has tipped $75 trillion. It's at pre-2008 levels. And we know history shows us that booms and busts get bigger. This is why I'm forecasting over the next couple years, we will see the real estate market completely blow up to the upside and then have a catastrophic collapse. Same with the stock market. I predict it'll hit over 20,000. Because cheap money from around the world is flooding into those asset classes.
I want to talk to you about real estate to start off with, because you have the notehouse.us and you do $100 million of business a year, and I always get your take on things. And it says first-time home buyers are at 27-year lows. It's home ownership is back to 1983 levels. Millennials are having a hard time buying homes with all this college debt. Does that make any difference? Who is in control of the Senate, the House, the White House? Is it, or are we headed for another, a housing collapse, as you say, but earlier than you say?
Well, I mean, the housing collapse will happen, no question. I say collapse, I mean, we'll see significant declines in values once the market blows up, but we're not there yet. The headlines that you mentioned, Greg, are really just conditioning. I mean, we know most of these media outlets are owned in some capacity by the big banks who speculate in the economy and love to basically give out free money to people to go buy homes so that they can enrich themselves, consolidate power, and even make even more money when the markets do fall apart. But look, I mean, just the other day, a couple days ago, Wall Street Journal was reporting that actually the headline, I have it right here, was from an October 28th article, More Risky Loans Allowed. And it's talking about how the Fed, the Department of Agriculture, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, they're all beginning the no money down loans. And as you know, and as I've said on these interviews going back almost 2 years now, after this midterm election, we will see no money down loans be fueled to really blow up this market. This time around, the shadow banking system will play a significant role in that. And so that's why I see for the next year or so, we're going to see real estate prices continue to go up. Remember, since 2010, real estate prices up over 30% across the country.
So you don't see any kind of a blow up yet, even though we're doubling down on the cheap money and the nobody down, no doc loans and all that junk. We're going to do the same thing all over again. But you don't think the economy will blow up in 2015?
I don't. I think we could seriously see some big headwinds in 2015. In fact, we may very well see some kind of event that sends economic shockwaves. But I actually think that the Fed and the U.S. government and a lot of governments in the West may be wanting to that actually happen. They might want to set that up as a reason to then come out and unleash massive quantitative easing, as we've seen the Bank of Japan do, as we've seen the ECB doing. We know money printing does not work, and it leads to only more money printing. So anyone who thinks that the Fed is not somehow fueling the money printing through currency swaps taking place in Japan or in Europe right now is just fooling themselves. This economy has not gotten any better. The only thing that's changed is the unprecedented scale of money printed that's being injected into the economy.
Well, now that you brought up both the ECB, Europe, and Japan, I mean, here we have, Mr. Boom, Doom, and Gloom. I think I got that right. Dr. Mark Farber says that, Japan is a giant Ponzi scheme and the country's broke. Over in Europe, we've got reports out that, they're in a triple dip recession. Does this set up the increased, we're going to pull the trigger first on the money printing and force the Fed to devalue the dollar even some more because the dollar is rising and these guys are dumping tons of money into their printed money into their economies.
Yeah, I actually think the dollar rising is another huge manipulation forward, and I think it's a last-ditch effort by the Fed to keep the dollar as the world reserve currency. So that way you'll get a lot of people that have this race towards the bottom, continue to devalue their currency in order to make their exports cheaper. So I think ultimately it ends really, really badly. And I don't really believe that this so-called bull run in the dollar is anything but fabricated, just like the rise in stocks or the rise in real estate prices. I think that Japan, just last week unveiled, Greg, historic quantitative easing. I believe for them it's either quantitative, it's QE8 or QE9. It's unprecedented in the history of modern economics. But we do know countries that have done similar things, not to that scale, it always ends badly. So yeah, is Japan going to go down? Japan will go down, as will all of these currencies that are being devalued and printed into non-existence, really.
Do you think the Federal Reserve and Goldman coming out saying, hey, it's actually Goldman, came out and said that there's a triple dip in Europe, is that going to give Draghi ammunition, the head of the ECB, to, hey, well, listen, we really need to print money and buy more bonds and do, the crazy stuff that got us here, we need to do more of it. Is that what that is, a kind of a precursor to set that up? Oh, do something quick.
Yeah, no question about it. Look, the ECB is pretty much run by the Federal Reserve and the Bank of England. The banks in Europe have not been recapitalized as they have by cheap money here in America. We know that the Fed has been involved in secret loans to the ECB, to European banks. And quite frankly, again, I think it's part of the conditioning and setting the precedent for the Fed to continue to inject liquidity around the world, particularly in the West, Greg, because we have a real interesting thing that's coming down, I believe. I think when the next crash happens, it's not just going to be the stock market or the bond market that's going to be on the line, but it's literally going to be the world reserve currency on the line. And that's what I talked about in the global economic reset. And so the West and the Western banking systems are doing everything they can. They know that event's coming, but they're doing everything they can to control it before it just gets completely unraveled, and they have no control of it.
Do you think that this economy can kind of limp along for a while? Some people think that that we'll have some major dislocations before the end of the year in the gold and silver market, and that Obamacare will kick in, and a lot of these things that were put off in 2015. I mean, there's also reports that Obama wanted healthcare companies not to talk about rate increases for their premiums, which I just got a big rate increase, and I'm voting against any Democrat here, and I'm not a Republican. I just think that this is like socialism, like fascism, like social fascism. Oh, maybe, I don't know, maybe it will eventually turn into something even more hideous, but, this is killing the economy. Do you think the economy dies by 1,000 cuts, or do you think it's going to be one big pop?
Well, I mean, certainly they're trying to turn what was once the greatest free market economy in the world into a type of France where you have the wealthy and the producers leaving the country because of a 75% tax rate. That's what the progressive communists that are running America now, both in the Republican and Democratic Party, what they want for this country. And they want that because they want a monopoly. They want a banking monopoly. They have their dollar monopoly. They want a big business monopoly. They don't want, someone like Greg Hunter from USA Watchdog to be able to compete with the big media. You see what I'm saying? So the way that they control that is through the money system. And so I think that they're willing to pull out all the stops. But as we've seen throughout history, it's been documented now, for over 200 years. As debt, let me give you a perfect example in the stock market. Margin debt is at a record high. That means people borrowing money to speculate in the stock market is at a record high. This always ends badly. So yeah, we'll have a bunch of different, you say 1,000 cuts. They're fundamentally transforming America. But I think ultimately we'll wake up on a Monday and by Friday, the entire economy will be completely different.
Wow. That's pretty. You think we're going to have a banking holiday coming up? A lot of people have talked about that in the past, but it's kind of died down that we're not going to have a banking holiday. Do you think we end up having a banking holiday, or do you think that's, far distant future?
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to happen. When that happens, I don't know. I have no doubt that will happen. I mean, when OPEC falls apart and, we lose the petrodollar, or when China and India and Russia come out with official announcement they want to ditch the dollar or have some kind of new super world currency as the world reserve currency. Yes, I think there'll be a run on banks. There'll be a banking holiday. People will panic, and most people won't know. But I remember you and I had an interesting conversation off interview a while back ago, and you hit the nail on the head, Greg. You said one day everyone will know what you and I already know, and that is absolutely true.
Well, I'm sad, but, a lot of people are in denial. I just had Warren Pollock on talking about that we're going to have a Pompeii moment. And what was happening, look at the bodies, look at the people in Pompeii. The volcano was erupting and going on. It just erupted, one day at one moment. It was doing that for a while, but it'll be okay, no problem. Everybody was going on, with their lives. And they were all underneath this, underneath the range of Pompeii. And they all died in their homes. They died at the table. They died out in the street. It was unbelievable. And I think that's what's going on now. A lot of people are just completely ignored. It's like when the market crashed. I have my friends would tell me, I don't want to open my statement. I don't want to open my statement. Well, why not? Why not open your statement and see where you are? But people don't want to open their statements.
Yeah, deal with reality. Here's another reality. And this is something that I hear, that I always bring up to people that I know on Wall Street and in other, financial institutions. They don't like talking about it. Some kind of do. And, this is just their opinion. But Greg, it's so obvious. Look at the string of bankers that have been suicided. Just this last month, we had 2 more. A lot of them dealing with derivatives, dealing with regulations, dealing with the regulatory departments. I have no doubt the system is so freaked out right now about there being economic Edward Snowden, or about information getting out that without a shadow of a doubt proves what many of us have known now for years, that this economy is completely a Ponzi scheme, a complete phony. So they're killing people that potentially pose a threat to the banking system as it stands. So that shows you how desperate these people are, but it also shows you what's actually on the line. I mean, we're talking a fundamental change of the Western banking system, of the Western economy, like we've never seen in thousands of years. And I think that's coming sooner than later. Is it going to come next week or next year? I don't think so. But is it going to come in the next 4 or 5, 6 years? I'd be surprised how much longer they can keep this thing propped up.
J.P. Morgan has, set aside $6 billion for legal costs. They were reporting that yesterday in the USA Today. They're adding another $1 billion plus, to their legal costs because of Forex trading. They got an official and criminal investigation. Of course, it's outrageous that all these things, LIBOR, Forex, gold, silver, stock market, subprime loans, mortgage-backed securities, all these derivatives. Not a single banker has gone to laundering money for drug cartels, laundering money for terrorists. I mean, you can launder money for countries on the terror list and not go to jail. You can just pay a fine. I'd like to know, what would it take for one of these bankers, a big one, not a little guy, not a 35-year-old, who has running $1 billion hedge book, for one of the big banks. I'm talking about, what would it take to send a big banker to jail? You can launder money for drug cartels and terrorists.
Yeah, I mean, Greg, that's interesting you say that, because actually there's a scary answer to that. I think that when we have the next big meltdown in America, when these bankers are exposed for their criminality and what they've done to the free market. These people are not capitalists. They are crony oligarchs, crony capitalists. There's going to be a lot of blood in the street, and there's going to be a lot of angry people out there looking for vengeance. And, I think that's when they'll ultimately pay. Look, like we said earlier, it doesn't matter who's in office, because the people that are being elected and the $4 billion plus that's been spent on this midterm election, a lot of that's been funded by these big banks that uses government to, in essence, protect themselves. The politicians don't represent us, unfortunately. There's a few that I think do look out for the republic, do look out for the people, but most of them don't. They look out for themselves. They look out for their power. And I don't think if they're, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, it really doesn't change the state of America, or for that matter, the change of the world. Remember, this is a one-party system. The only difference, in my opinion, between both parties is just rhetoric.
Maybe you might have a little less tyranny with the Republicans. I guess we get to keep our guns with the Republicans, huh?
Well, I guess it depends on what Republicans you're talking about. I mean, look at, if John McCain, I often say, as much as I dislike Obama for his naked communism, I think if John McCain would have won, we likely would have already started World War III with Russia. So you have to ask yourself, who's worse, or someone like Lindsey Graham. These people are hardcore about the NSA, about the Department of Homeland Security. They really freak me out just as much as some of the radicals on the Democratic Party. But again, I think there is a glimmer of hope with people like Rand Paul and some other Republicans that are beginning to be truthful with the American people, beginning to talk about the real issues and problems that this country faces. And it's just a question of whether or not the American people will wake up in time to do anything about it, Greg.
How do you protect yourself? How are people should be paying? I don't want to be a big stump for gold and silver, but when you look at all the asset classes, what else is there? I mean, if you're a paper bond or a dollar or a yen or the euro, I mean, all that stuff is being. What do you do to protect yourself? Is it a good time to buy a house, or should you hold your powder and save your money?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that over the next 6 months, it wouldn't be bad to have some cash on you, a dollar. I think the dollar, they'll keep manipulating the dollar up, which will allow you to maybe buy some foreign real estate cheaper. I think I, of course, love gold and silver. It's at a spectacular sale right now. I also enjoy real estate. I think one of the biggest investments for me as well right now in protecting my wealth is my business and having different businesses that I can invest in. Remember, I don't believe that when the collapse happens, it's going to be 100% unemployment rate, or it's going to be the destruction of all markets. Markets will continue to function. They'll still be here. There'll be a lot of poverty. Likely half of the American people will be under the poverty line during the next reset, but there'll be those that won't. And those that aren't in that poverty line will be the ones that, had a little bit of foresight, that invested in themselves, had a business that could be depression-proofing their life. And I think those are all really important. I mean, look, you and I, Greg, can go out and buy, $1,000 or $100,000 in gold and keep it in a vault in our, in our home or wherever. It's not cash flowing. It's not producing any income. We're going to have to sell it to live at some point. So that's not the be-all, end-all for me.
Have a business that can grow and thrive and actually, circulate money through the economy is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, look, with all the crazy insanity of criminality taking place in the world we live in today, I think there's some really good things as well. I often talk about how, because of technology, because of the internet, we're on what I call the golden age of business. And I think that, we talked about this before, Greg, where 10 years ago, if somebody wanted to open up a retail store, they had to go out and get a loan. They had to get a brick and mortar store. They had to order a bunch of inventory. Today, you can do that online for almost free or next to nothing. That has never, ever existed ever. Or, for example, USA Watchdog. 15 years ago, you would have had to, and you've already been through that, you would have had to have competed with mainstream media.
Yes.
They wouldn't have allowed you on. As soon as you had guests like me or other people on, they would have fired you. But today, you can go direct to people like myself and others that watch you regularly. That's never existed either. So there are a lot of good things taking place, a lot of things that government cannot control unless they shut down the internet. I don't believe they'll do that because there'll be a revolution. But the point is that we are also on the cusp of a golden age of business. And people, I think, need to really recognize that just because there's a market collapse or a market meltdown doesn't necessarily mean it's the end of the road. It's the end of that business cycle. But we know from thousands of years of history that there's business and economics. They always work in a cycle.
Fabian Calvo, your new book, The Global Economic Reset, it's out now. I'll make sure there's a link after this interview. Also, FabianForLiberty.com. Fabian Calvo, thank you so much for joining us today on USA Watchdog.
Hey, Greg, thanks for having me on. I love your commentary, love your videos, and I always appreciate being a guest on your show.
People love you too, man. We always have our trolls now, don't we? But, listen, the lion's share of people look at the likes, the thumbs up and thumbs down, and you get way more thumbs up. I really appreciate you being on, Fabian Calvo. Also, your business, thenotehouse.us. Fabian Calvo, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.